medical students don't like to be told they can't cut up little dogs and cats. And in the start of the 20th century, there was what was called the little brown dog riots. Now these are very amusing. In Bermondsey, or Battersea, Bermondsey I think it was, Battersea, I can't remember quite, I'm not going to look it up now. There were a lot of suffragettes, a lot of radicalism, the first black mayor, a lot of people with a really radical sense, a bit like, I suppose, Bethnal Green nowadays. And they erected a statue of a little brown dog, and this little brown dog represented a dog that the students at University College London had cut up, apparently, and they cut it up in a nasty way and it had suffered pain, so they put the statue up. In other words, they were anti-vivisection. The students were infuriated by this, rowed across the Thames in a little rowing boat and tore the statue down. They put the statue back up again. They tore it down again. And so it went. In the end, the whole lot blew up into a fight and everybody hit each other, basically. The conclusion was, little brown statue vanishes because it's causing too much trouble, and that's the end of that. So students who you think would know better are not always radicals on the right side, but very often on the wrong side. The other injustice, I guess, and maybe I'll finish on this and have some chat if you like, is the fact that some riots have been incredibly forgotten. The Gordon riots, I'd say, killed about 200, maybe 300 people, caused vast amounts of cost. I mean, it was the most destructive thing that's happened in London since the Great Fire of London. The next most destructive thing is the Lusitania riots. Now, I have no idea if any of you know what the Lusitania riots are, but I guess you can guess. The Lusitania riots, 1915. Lusitania, ship, of course, not the Titanic, but a ship with American and British people on board, was torpedoed by the Germans, and this caused a wave of hysteria in Britain. Now, in Britain, up until that point, there were very, very large numbers of Germans openly living as German-British. They were sugar manufacturers, they were bakers, a lot of them were barbers. I don't know why they like to cut hair, but anyway, they did. So when the war came, a lot of these people who had been living in London for a very long time had their sons and maybe their daughters, but certainly their sons in the British army. They fought for Britain. They didn't fight for Germany. They weren't traitors or anything like that. They fought for Britain. British people, of course, absolutely hated the idea of Germans at this point. Unfortunately, with the sinking of Lusitania, the German population was attacked. The German population lived in North London, Tottenham, Wood Green. It lived in the East End. There's still a German church, by the way, just off Mile End Road. Catholic German church. And there were very large numbers of Germans working in London. All of these people were attacked. All of these people were attacked. Notices went up, don't deal in German. It was a bit like Kristallnacht. No one got killed. No one got killed, I have to say. But the population of British Germans went from many thousands to almost nil overnight. For two reasons. One, almost everybody changed their name, including a certain German family that lived in a castle in Windsor, who called themselves the Windsors, though they're not. Of course, that was the name invented in 1915, so they wouldn't get bashed up. The Queen, by the way, was forever being sent abroad. Whenever anything happened, she was sent off to Osborne, Queen Victoria rather. Anything disturbed. They immediately changed their name. And of course, that nice fluffy dog called a German Shepherd was an Alsatian. So you got rid of all the German words as quickly as you could. Even Battenberg cake probably went into decline. I have no idea, but you can imagine. Very large numbers of people attacked perfectly. What's interesting is they attacked people that were their peaceable neighbours. They didn't attack them because they hated them. In fact, this is the most upbeat riot that's ever occurred in British history. It's the most destructive for 200 years. It almost wiped it. It didn't kill, but it drove out the German population of London. So firstly, drove out the German population of Britain because it showed that they were aliens. They weren't accepted. These people spoke perfect English. Didn't speak accent, didn't have weird clothes on or anything of that nature. It was an anti-German riot. It wasn't an anti-Jewish riot, although Jewish people who might have been German might have been caught up in it. Nevertheless, the way it went on is quite extraordinary. I'll just finish, possibly. I'll read you a little bit about how this riot was conducted. It's it's funny and terrible all at the same time. It does show you that if you step out of line, your neighbours will destroy your house immediately. And however much you like your neighbours, it's quite amazing how your neighbours will steal everything you have if there's a good cause to do it. So don't trust anybody. Put the bars up quick. Well, certainly they did in those days. Hold on, I'll just find the page. Okay. So this is the violence has gone on now for about a day and a half. Greater violence against German property followed in Stratford and Manor Park, where the shops of Mr. Bachmeier, Mr. Menzler, Mr. Krantz and Mr. Streitberger had their windows smashed by a crowd whose demeanour was reported as good-humoured and easy to control. They are smashing windows, they are running down the street, and the police are standing there saying, "Oh, hello, well done." "God, that window's still okay, on. Why didn't you smash that one?" And that's how it went. Indeed, they did not. Indeed, so good-humoured were these riots that they didn't even disrupt the tram operations or bus timetables, reported the local press. Mounted police, the police did turn out to protect these poor Germans who had done nothing wrong, were stationed opposite Streitberger the butcher and Krantz the jeweller in Romford Road, Manor Park. They did not prevent the looting of the shops or the destruction of the shop owners' houses. They just sat there. At that point, one of the people is reported, he was hauled up in front of the magistrate, and he was hauled up for stealing a cheese. He obviously decided he liked the cheese in his house, so he nicked the cheese and he ran down the street with a piece of cheese. And he was caught by the magistrate. So they did try to do a little bit. The Kent Independent, which was, I don't know if it still exists, but it's a paper in those days, stoked up the violence. The apathetic British public has yawned, stretched itself and opened its eyes. The cloak of lethargy, which seems to have been its mantle of late, has suddenly been thrown off. Throughout the country, the people have taken, if only temporarily, the law into their own hands on the alien question. The sinking of the Lusitania has kindled the smouldering fires of indignation throughout the land. Stolid Britons, finally roused to indignation by German bestiality and fiendishness, as it was called in those days, nevertheless soon found themselves crowded into police courts for offences ranging from theft to disorderly conduct. One rioter, as I said before, Richard Smith, I'd love to meet this guy, who was long dead unfortunately, at Manor Park, was even apprehended carrying off a suspicious piece of cheese. Terrifying one's German neighbours was treated by many not as a criminal act, but as a good-hearted, if rambunctious way of letting off steam. The destruction throughout was preceded with a good sense of humour, and there was not, as perhaps one might have expected in some quarters, any display of acerbity or bitter animosity, so they smashed up these windows and stole everything in a spirit of kindness. By many, undoubtedly, the demonstrations were regarded as fitting outlets to their animal spirits, and young lads and girls were quick to seize upon the opportunity as a safety valve to their effervescent energy. One man boasted, "I've worked my way from Barking today, and I've been throwing pianos out of windows all the way down." Now it strikes me that someone, a British working class guy throwing pianos out of German houses suggests that the Germans were a damn sight better educated and more artistic than the English neighbours, and that might have been one of the problems, that they played their pianos too loudly and people basically couldn't afford them and didn't have them. Because most of these people were highly respected. One attack, listen to this, unbelievable. Two attacks are interesting. One attack was stopped because the postman couldn't get to the letterbox. The house is on fire, the place has been smashed up, but the man has to deliver his letters, so the driver was actually stopped, stood aside, let him post his letters, and then walk off him. One attack, another attack, was only aborted when the crowd had explained to them that the shop owner had just lost a son fighting for Britain. The crowd magnanimously saying, "He's a jolly good fellow," and marched off. So, looking at these riots, that's incredibly ephemeral. But it just struck me how amazing, what an amazing insight that gives you into the way people live, what people live. What I was interested in producing this book, and the second book which I produced, which I'll just say a word about, which was Terror Within, which is a book about a Republican history of Britain. As opposed to doing the kings and queens and everything that everybody knows, I did a Republican history of Britain. And it comes out very, very different.